Welcome back to Author Armchair Chats. How are you doing? Today we have a very special guest, Emma Bennet, author of Last Dance, Second Chance. And this is such a darling story. If you haven't heard of it yet, it's been out for 2 days. It's her most recent release, and she's got an amazing collection of titles, by the way. So let's bring her on without further ado. Emma, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very well, can't complain. Trying to make sure everything stays a little smooth around these parts. So let's get in with my first favorite question, which is, what was the first moment you felt the spark to inspire your very first story?
So my very first story was actually a picture book story, which I wrote for my son, my first son, who was a baby then. And I can't even remember exactly what the first one was. I think I wrote about 3 or 4 of them when he was really little. Um, and I got some good feedback from publishers and things like that. But my first romance came about because I read a completely ridiculous article in a newspaper, basically saying how easy it was to write a romance. And that they were completely formulaic and it was so easy. And I thought, well, I've read a lot of romances and I really don't think it's that easy to write one, but I'll have a go and I'll see. And turns out it's not easy. It's really not that easy at all. But
I
I
wonder.
think I'm about 10, 11 romances in. So, presumably I'm getting better.
I think you're great. I think your books are great. So, what inspired your most recent title, Last Dance, Second Chance?
Normally, what happens with stories with me is that I get the idea for either the heroine or the heroine situation first. In this case, it was the heroine. I just had the idea for this ballet dancer whose entire life had been ballet since she was absolutely tiny. And she's worked and worked and worked, and she's finally got to the position where she has been given her first solo part. And she's so excited. And then disaster strikes and she's injured. And how does she deal with that? And then during this injury, she meets a man and she falls in love with him. But she can't carry on her dance career, which is in New York, and be with this guy who lives in the south of England. So I just thought there was quite a lot of stuff going on there that she was going to have to deal with. And I thought that would be a lot of fun for readers to come along on her journey with her.
Yes, I think my favorite part of your main character in this title is that she's a ballet dancer,
Yeah.
because it's not really a a career or hobby that people would think of first. And I
Mhm.
think it's very unique, and I love that you did that.
I think it's what a lot of little girls would have loved to have been when they were absolutely tiny. I wasn't allowed to do ballet because
Oh,
I've got no coordination whatsoever. A fairy elephant is what my father used to say I'd be more like, and I think my parents felt it would be a waste of money, and so yeah, I guess there was always that part of me that was thinking, well, if they'd let me go to the ballet the ballet classes, like
oh,
who knows what could have
well,
happened.
like that's what they teach you, is the gracefulness, and
Yeah, it might have
to
helped.
get you
Maybe I
out of
wouldn't bump into
clumsiness.
things. Exactly. This might have
Like,
been a really good
I would
time.
have said, Father, alternatively, this is going to help me not do these things.
Exactly,
The forever
exactly.
salesperson over here. I'd have been like, wait a
Yeah,
minute.
I needed you. I needed you there.
I
But there
wish we
were
were besties
definitely
back then. I would have helped you.
there was what I didn't think about though with the character is how difficult some aspects of writing her would be because we want to bond with the heroines of the books that we read. We want to like them. And there was a danger that she would come across as quite unlikable because she was so focused on what she wanted. And it's a very, very competitive industry. You know, you
Oh,
can't be best friends with all the other dancers, especially in the case of the women. It's so competitive with the women.
frenemies.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I did want to show some of that to make it realistic while also making it so that the reader would like her.
Mm-hmm.
And also, of course, she has to be incredibly fit, was the other thing. So I wanted her to be relatable, but you know, usually if you have a heroine in a romantic comedy and she's upset about something, she goes and she grabs a tub of ice cream because it's funny, and
Right.
she sits and has an entire tub of Ben and Jerry's. Well, guess what? A ballet dancer wouldn't do that,
No, she wouldn't.
you know. But I also didn't want to go along the lines of her, you know, eating clean all the time, being completely unrelatable, and people possibly worrying that she might have some kind of eating disorder. So that was
Which
something
is
I had to be
another
very
problem
aware of.
in that
Mm,
career,
yeah,
right? They
it
do.
definitely is. Yeah, and if this wasn't a romantic comedy, then you know something like that should probably be at least alluded to with some of the other dancers to make it so it's realistic to the industry. But because of the genre that it is, it's not appropriate for that genre, and so I had to kind of skirt around that a bit.
I love that. So, can you give us a peek behind the curtain and about your writing routine or any quirky habits when you're writing?
I don't really have that many quirky habits, except for the fact that because I'm British, I do have to have a cup of tea by me when I'm writing. I couldn't possibly sit down and just start writing and not have a cup of tea, or maybe coffee, but usually tea.
Mm-hmm.
That would just be very, very strange. So always have to have a cup of tea.
I
My
love
I
that.
don't really have, thank you. I don't really have a writing routine, to be honest. It really depends on what else is going on that day. I've got four children. The younger ones are still home educated. They've all been home educated all through their lives. So that takes up a lot of time. I'm also a freelance developmental editor. I'm a book coach. I'm a writing instructor, and I run creative writing classes locally. So depending on the day, I could have all kinds of other things going on. And unless it's something like NaNoWriMo and I'm taking part in it, writing very much has to fit in amongst everything else on a lot of days.
Okay, so a little bit on that. How do you schedule? Do you use time blocking or how do you manage all these things from day to day? That's a lot. I love children, but four. Whew.
They're not little anymore. Um, no, I don't do anything like time blocking or scheduling. That's not me at all. I just work out in the morning what I need to attempt to get done in the day, and hopefully it will get done. Today, I sat down to work and I had a few setbacks, and sometimes that happens. So I had a little bit of a whinge about it. I made myself a fresh cup of tea, and I just went and worked on something else until those things kind of got worked out. And yeah, sometimes you have days like that. It really
So
just
that's
depends.
great. You know how to pivot when it's just not going your way. You just kind of went,
I,
hmm.
I think you have to when, especially if you have a busy household, um, like we do, you definitely have to be able to pivot when things go wrong because they frequently do, and you have to be able to take advantage of little bits of time as well. Like the other day, I think I had 14 minutes until we were going out, and I knew I needed to film a video and it would be about 10 minutes. So I was
Oh,
like, right, there we go. I'm hopping out to the
right
garden.
in
I'm
there.
filming my video. Everyone be quiet and leave me alone, you know.
Stop it! I got 10 minutes.
I've got my 10 minutes. I had 4 minutes. I had 2 minutes either side. I was good. I had time to set up. It was fine.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So your characters feel very real. So do you secretly borrow traits from people you know, or are they purely imaginative?
I think they're pretty much imaginative. I probably do I don't borrow so much traits actually, but things I overhear. I go to a sewing group quite regularly. And, when you get a group of women together, you hear a lot of stories. And so I definitely pick things up from
Priceless.
there. I know. And my creative writing group, things that they kind of tell me and that they come out with. They were telling me the other day that there's a little village about 15 minutes drive from here, and I hadn't even known it was so small. I didn't even know the name. It wasn't
Huh,
on the main road to anywhere. And apparently, they have their own dating app just for this village. And everyone was saying, but there's like 10 people, and most of them are cousins. Like, how does this work? We have no idea. But immediately in my head, I was thinking, okay, how funny would that be if you had a small, like this cute little town, and some of like the elderly busybodies set up this dating app
I
for
love it.
the people that they thought needed to be hooked up. I just thought that would be brilliant. So things like
It
that kind
is.
of over here.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. So every author has their favorite part of writing. Which scene or chapter in your book, pick any title that you prefer, that you enjoyed crafting the most?
In Last Dance, Second Chance, I think it was probably the scene where Jessica is walking her father's dog and she falls and she damages her foot. So, I mean, I didn't like putting her through it. We don't like doing this to,
No.
to our characters. But it was quite fun to work out the logistics of what the dog would have to do. And then the hero comes along with another dog and they kind of get entangled. And then she has to kind of fall down a riverbank a bit. And yeah, just the logistics of that were kind of quite fun to work out. And then he picks her up and carries her
Oh,
back to the car, which it's very Marianne Dashwood and Willoughby in Sense and
so precious. I
Sensibility.
love that.
And so I really like that kind of, imagining how she would feel, like the devastation, but she's also being held by this very handsome man who doesn't appear to think she weighs anything and is just
Well,
marching along. I mean,
what girl wouldn't want
fabulous.
that?
Exactly.
Just saying. So, publishing a book is no small feat. What was your biggest aha moment during the publishing process or even the querying process for the publisher?
Watch out, Bruno's about.
What are you doing?
I've been hoping he'd do that.
I know you're, and then you tattled.
He's
See
so
what
good.
happens?
I know, I did, and sorry, it just gets stitches.
Stop it. Yes,
Anyway,
Kamal's encouraging you. Let's see what
so
happens.
I think my biggest aha moment was probably in my third book, which is called My Perfect Hero, when I properly learned about story structure and how to use it. And I love that book anyway. It's probably my favorite book. But, and I don't think it's just because of this, but it was a lot easier to write because I started at the beginning and when I got to the end, I stopped. And that sounds really, really obvious. But when I think it's very easy when you start writing a book to be very excited about certain things that are going to happen and certain scenes that you have in your head. And it's very, very difficult not to get them down. So with my first two books, they took me much longer to write because I think of something fun that could happen. So I'd write that scene and then, I'll just write the end because that's going to be like really cool. So I'll write the end and then I do this bit and then I'd write the beginning. And then you're trying to connect them all up and make it all make sense and make it flow properly like a story does.
Right.
Whereas if you kind of stop, even without reading any of the amazing books that are out there, like Save the Cat and The Hero's Journey and all things like that, if you just stop and think about stories, we've all been told stories our entire lives. We've all absorbed stories. We know how they work. You know that at the beginning of a film, there's going to be an opening scene which sets the scene as it is now, and then there's going to be blah, 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 blah.
And what we're
And we
going to
know that.
anticipate and all those, yes.
So even without studying books, once I stopped and started at the beginning and worked my way through the end, allowing that story to flow properly, it just became so much easier and so much quicker to write a book.
So one question I've actually been, I love this question. And the answers have been surprising for me. So and I'm curious what you're going to say. So as we're discussing, writing is not always easy. So how do you push through writer's block or tough days?
I'm not sure who said it, but there's a wonderful quote. It's something like it's very easy to get through writer's block when you have a mortgage to pay. Right,
I love that.
writing is my career. It's what I do. If I don't write, if I don't give my books to my publishers, I will lose my publishing contract and I won't earn any money. So that's a great
That's
incentive
fair.
to push through. There was a time when I wasn't able to write. I had a problem with this ear, with terrible vertigo, and I wasn't able to write for a
Oh
long
no.
time. And I had to leave my publisher at the time, and I didn't produce any books for a few years. And that was a terrible feeling. And I don't want to feel like that again. So there's that as well. I don't want to let anybody down. If I've said I'm going to produce a book by a certain date, I will produce the book by a certain date. If there are days when you feel more inspired and more motivated than others, and sometimes it's easier to write. You know, there are days when I will write 2 or 3 thousand words, not many, and it's not, and it comes quite well. Other days I'll struggle to get 500, and that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Depends how desperate the situation is as to whether I push through. If
Fair.
it's a NaNoWriMo situation, I will try to push through. I will stop what I'm doing. I'll get out a pad and paper. I'll plan out what I need to write next. I've always got a plan as well for what I'm going to write. I do plot my book. So I think that helps because you
Yeah.
do know where your story's going, even if you don't know how to write it exactly perfectly.
So would you say you're a plotter, not a pantser?
I would say I think I'm a plotter.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, by the time I get about 10,000 words into a book, I discover I haven't plotted it properly.
Oh,
And I get
okay.
cross with myself every single time. And I realize I haven't put enough plot and I haven't got enough detail, and it's really annoying, and I have to stop and kind of sort it out. So
Okay.
I want to be a plotter. I attempt to be a plotter, but I do not succeed.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that. So we all love a good story. What's one book, not your own, that you recommend everyone should read?
Now, you see, everyone is quite difficult because, of course, everyone have very different tastes. So
Very
I
true.
wouldn't recommend, like a contemporary romance, like I would really enjoy to read because I know that not everybody would. I would say that if you haven't read any Jane Austen before, I would really recommend to anybody that they read it because it's very, very accessible. I think sometimes people think that these books are going to be really, really heavy and they're not going to be able to get through them. Austen really is not at all. And although there is romance in them, it's not just about romance. There's a lot of comedy, there's a lot of fantastic observation of society, which is just so, so clever. And yeah, so probably Pride and Prejudice. That's just because that's the one.
Mr.
If you
Darcy!
like Mr. Darcy, but Northanger Abbey, if you want even more of a laugh, just because I love the whole gothic novel kind of um, joke that she's got going on with that. I really, really enjoy that one. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. One last question before I let you go. If your life were a book, what would the title be?
Probably something like, "Oh Lord, what's she doing now?"
I love that.
Yeah. Or why is she still procrastinating?
Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Emma Bennet, so much for being here. You're amazing. Would you like to leave our audience with the details on how they can buy your books and find out more about you?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me. All my books, including my latest Last Dance Second Chance, can be found on Amazon. If you just put into the search bar Emma Bennet with one T at the end, they will all come up. I think there's about 14, 15 of them. All in all, now I also have a YouTube channel, which I'm sure will be linked down in the description below, where I talk about author life. I do interviews as well. I used to do live streams. I might do those again. I do
Oh,
some
I hope you
vlogs. I give
do.
writing advice. I know. There's all kinds of things on there, many, many videos. So make sure that you check it out if you haven't already.
Wonderful. And for more information, the links will be in the descriptions below and also in the show notes when we move along to the podcast. Thank you so much, Emma. I'm going to put
Thank
you
you.
backstage for a little bit here. And if you like this interview, please like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to share. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Armchair Author Chats. Thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to see you next time.